Well, hello friends now, and welcome to the Pirate Round. He be Captain Scaldipus here. This be the Scarlet Raven, and this be our friend, Captain Tarnar, who's come up from the southern realms to visit us today. We're going to talk about pirates, pirate things, and piratey thingy things that you might have seen and around here. And so, with that, we're going to start this episode of the Pirate Round with a toast. Not milk toast, and not toast that you cook and drop on the floor, but rather
butter toast.
We're gonna not hot butter toast. We're gonna start with a toast of fine rum, and this we do for our friends. And this we do for the friends who are not here, and those who have passed away, and those we wish were here, and those we miss dearly. And we say to you now, Yar har, welcome to the Pirate Round. Yar har.
Your heart.
And I bite ya. So, Captain Turner now, what have you got to say for yourself?
Oh, I didn't know I had anything to say for myself.
Well, that'd be a captain's privilege. He ain't got to say much at all. But I bet you got a tale to tell us, don't you?
Well, I thought maybe today we could talk about an interesting pirate, Jean Lafitte.
Ah, Jean
Oh, so we're going to be
Lafitte.
taking it forward in time.
Jean
Forward in
Lafitte,
time.
the barefoot pirate. Yes, they say that.
The interesting thing about Jean, well, there's several interesting things, but one of the interesting things that I find about Jean Lafitte
He
is
was
that
named after a cereal.
he was named after...
The barefoot pirate. No, we're not going there.
Captain Crunch. Jean Lafitte.
Well,
Who was actually named after Jean Lafitte.
all right, that'd be interesting. No, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that he came after what's generally considered to be the golden age of piracy.
Ah, true.
But he was quite a pirate of the Caribbean. Absolutely fit the bill, other than just being a little bit later than that.
True.
Generally, they would say that the age of piracy kind of came to an end around 1730s or so.
Yeah.
With the capture of Blackbeard and everything like that.
Yeah, that's true.
But Jean Lafitte was incredibly adaptive, and he found ways to make it work. He continued well into the 1800s. In fact, they don't know exactly when he was born, but they suspect that it was around 1780. There are different versions of that. So he didn't even get started until well after that golden age.
No, I heard that he was actually, there were rumors that he was born in France to a Jewish family, that his mother and grandmother had fled Spain during the Inquisition, and that his grandfather had actually been killed during the Inquisition.
That's one of the stories, and it's disputed because they think perhaps that he told people he was born in France because it was considered to be somewhat hoity-toity, and he was a fancy dresser, and he liked to have a lot of acclaim, but it's possible that he was actually born in what we'd call modern-day Haiti, which wouldn't have had a whole lot of acclaim to it, so they don't really know for sure. They aren't exactly sure what year, but 1780 is the year that a lot of people go by. 1776, actually, is another year that some people go by, which is interesting.
True.
So we don't know exactly what his past is. We do know that he had a military history, and he was trained as a naval officer.
Oh.
So
In St. Kitts, I believe it
in
was.
St. Kitts, that sounds about right.
Oh, St. Kitts then.
No, they say he was quite handsome. He loved drinking and gambling, and he loved women.
He loved women. He loved carousing, drinking, gambling, and
Dressed-
dressing quite nicely.
Yes,
He was
very-
sort of the
very
opposite of what we were talking about Avery, who wasn't so much of a gambler and kind of didn't spend a lot of money. He was sort of the opposite, very flamboyant and very showy.
Very aristocratic mannerisms and airs.
And he and his brother made their home in New Orleans, which at that time was a popular place to trade goods that were bought and sold in the Caribbean, being very convenient right here in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, that to be right in there, that area right there. Of course, you can see it's the doorstep of the whole Caribbean there.
Which
that
a
whole
lot
area.
of, piracy, what we know about piracy, we in the Pirate Round, we focus on everything from, those that sailed from the New World around the Round, and those also in the Caribbean. Like he was focused in the Caribbean.
That's true. Classic Pirate of the Caribbean.
Yeah, true.
Now, his brother and he were legitimate businessmen for a time, buying and selling and auctioning goods out of their warehouse there in New Orleans. And in 1807, I believe, the United States passed the Embargo Act, which made it illegal for anyone to buy and sell goods from a ship that was not of the United States or national origin, I believe.
Right, because there was a conflict going on, the belief that, not the belief, it was actually a fact, that the English were actually impressing American soldiers or sailors saying that, well, you were born before, you know, the Americas became the Americas and had their independence, so you're actually rightfully ours and we're going to take you, which caused a lot of problems.
Caution them, but they'll do that.
And you can imagine if you're a businessman in New Orleans and you're buying and selling goods coming into the port, that would make your business very difficult.
True.
Right.
So it was very difficult for the United States to enforce the Embargo Act down there in New Orleans. They didn't have a whole lot of forces down there, and so the Lafitte brothers sort of turned their nose up at that and said, we'll buy and sell what we want to sell. And so they were kind of a haven for people to come and sell their perhaps ill-gotten goods or the goods that they couldn't sell above ground. They'd sell it below board. And that kind of is what started them off, I think, on the wrong side of the law and got them their beginning in piracy.
Now, there's a belief that I heard too that they would actually take auctions in an old prehistoric bound.
A temple, they called it the
bound.
temple or something
Right.
like that.
Oh, true.
That'd be true. And that was, they would make a lot of money that way. And so the government didn't like that very much. So they wanted to stop that. Now, trying to think, the Barataria.
Right, a little island.
Yeah, that'd be his own personal country
Aye.
area. They called it Barataria. It'd be very down at the very end there, where the Mississippi goes into the ocean there.
Right.
And the Mississippi, of course, forces all this dirt down, and they make all these little islands down here. And one of them be Barataria.
And the reason that he moved his operation to Barataria was to get himself removed from the ground forces that would come in and try and stop him and his brother from doing their trade. Now, at some point, his brother ended up getting arrested for this. And this is when Jean Lafitte really kind of came into his own and really started taking up piracy and capturing ships. There was in 1812, I believe it was. No, that's not right. I'm trying to remember exactly what the dates were. But they captured a ship and decided to use it for engaging in piracy. And at that point, they really became proper pirates.
Right, well, I know that in 1812 they bought a schooner that they named the Dorado under Captain Trey Cook.
Oh, that could be what I was thinking.
And they used that, and then it was around 1813 they took a Spanish Shemefra brigade, brig with which had 77 slaves and about, I believe it was around $18,000 in profit.
And I believe, if I'm correct, that they ended up releasing the ship because they deemed it not really worthy for piracy, but they kept all of the loot.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, of course.
And of course sold it through their auction house at Temple, they called it.
Yeah.
And
Well, I know he had his first ship. Then there's the one that captured the brig, which they called the Dorado.
the Dorado.
Now the Dorado is a fish
True.
that is quite fast.
Aye.
And
It'd also be a name for gold. Gold Dorado.
the El
El
Dorado,
Dorado.
right, El Dorado.
Yeah, true, yeah.
And the Dorado captured another schooner, which they ended up calling the La Diligente,
Mm-hmm.
which had 12, 14-pound cannons on it.
Aye.
I can see
He
that.
had quite a fleet, actually, at the time. In fact, when the War of 1812 broke out, the United States government was woefully ill-equipped to defend New Orleans. And when Andrew Jackson actually went down there to examine it, he determined that there was no way that they could defend New Orleans. So he suggested that they actually ask Jean Lafitte, who was a pirate and quite notorious. The people down in New Orleans, at the time, he had some level of celebrity because he allowed the
Right.
town to continue to flourish and prosper in a
True,
time when
true.
otherwise it could not have.
Now, before then, actually, the British had gone to Lafitte
Aye.
and actually asked them to work for him, and that they would give him a commission, and that they would give him lands and,
Aye, that'd be true.
pardon him. And Lafitte actually didn't believe that the English could win.
Aye.
So he took those letters then to the Americans and said, "Hey, I believe that you can win, and here's my proof that
That's correct.
that the British are trying to turn me against
And
you."
they weren't entirely certain whether he was being above board
Right.
or whether he was actually on board with the English at that time. But
Yeah, true.
but Andrew Jackson decided that he really needed somebody with his level of knowledge of waging war and of the area. And he
The
came
ships,
in,
the cannons,
the ships, the cannons, and the
supplies.
territory with the swamps and everything like that. And he made a lot of recommendations as to where they needed to move their fortifications that probably did help save them the war.
True.
Yes, I know that he went in and he was, Andrew Jackson asked him what he thought, and And Lafitte, was telling him, well, you better protect this area over here because the English are going to come around through the swamps, and you better protect that over and extend your lines a little bit. And here's some cannons. Some of his own crew actually manned some of those cannons and actually pushed the English back and prevented what Lafitte said the English would do, be coming around through the swamps or end around and flanking.
That'd be true.
Now, there were only a few routes that they could have taken into New Orleans there at the time. They had fortified others and torn down the land bridges in some places, and they essentially funneled the British into one spot, to where they had the swamp on one side, and they had an open water bayou on the other. The British had to come up this neck, and the Lafitte had built breastworks there across this place, and I believe that breastworks is still visible today if you go there.
I believe so.
And when they lined their cannon up, almost like a fortress, and they made the British march up into there, and they opened fire upon them, and slaughtered them to a great mass as they fired grape shot round after round into the British as they kept marching.
There's a little song. In 1814, we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson along the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon, we took a little bean, we cut the bloody British in the town of New Orleans.
That's right. We
fired our guns, and the British kept coming. We fired once more.
And you know whatever happened. Right. But anyway, what happened then?
And they began to run.
They began to run. And so essentially, they were able to push the British back and prevent them from taking the breastworks, so that they couldn't get the open pathway there into New Orleans. And one of the things that people don't understand about and don't realize about this, as the British retreated, they took many of their wounded with them, but then they began to leave their wounded behind because they couldn't carry them all. And so many of those men were killed and eaten by alligators in the swamps as they made their way through the swamplands back toward the ship. And they called them giant swamp lizards at the time. And they would see even today that those British troops have a great fear of those swamp lizards who'd come out to the murk and grab their wounded men and drag them off and eat them. And it was a victory there for the young United States, which you can lay at the feet of Jean Lafitte there, because he was instrumental in preserving our liberty.
So when people talk about United States history and pirate history, they really are the same thing.
That's true.
And Jean Lafitte and all of his crew, all of the men were given letters of pardon and commendations.
True.
They were instrumental.
Yes.
But even though he got his letter of pardon, he went ahead and continued his piracy.
Galveston Island.
I mean, he'd be a pirate.
He did. He went down to Galveston, and at that time, the governors in Galveston, I get the feeling that they weren't particularly invested in it, and they kind of left when he arrived. I don't know if they were afraid of him or what, but he appointed himself the governor and renamed the island Campeche, which it's known as Galveston again today, but at the time he called it Campeche, and he basically rebuilt the town. He built a large fortification that they called the Maison Rouge, which is the Red House, and kind of ruled its governor from there for some time. And at some point in all of this, the new governor in New Orleans got so fed up with him attacking ships that he put a bounty on his head. And Jean Lafitte, in his typical flair, went ahead and put a bounty on the governor's head in retaliation. So he really, I get the feeling sometimes that his successes were owed to the fact that he sometimes had more gumption than common sense. He didn't know that he shouldn't do these things, so he just went ahead and did them. And had success for the most part.
Now, after the Americans again attacked his fort, the USS Enterprise, not Captain Kirk or the aircraft carrier, but one of the first Enterprises that we have. It was a schooner, and when they burned down the Maison Rouge, that he fled to the coast of Cuba.
That's right.
And it was actually in Cuba he kept continuing until Cuba actually put a stop.
And it was, he always told people that he was operating under a letters of marque. And letters of marque is permission from a government to allow you to sink enemy ships.
True.
And his crew always believed that he always had letters of marque. And it came out later that he, most of the time, did not have letters of marque. But later on in his career, he did get some letters of marque. When he was operating out of Cuba, I believe he had a letters of marque from, I believe it was Colombia. And and at that time, he was still a very successful pirate.
Yeah, they call it Greater Columbia.
Wherever you could find one.
Right.
Right. And I know later on he, after he left Cuba, he went to Greater Colombia and worked with Simon Bolivar.
Simon Bolivar.
Right.
That's true.
And now he was actually granted a commission on the schooner, the General Santander.
Yeah, General Santander. Yeah.
And it was down there when he was operating under the letter of marque from Greater Colombia that he finally met his death.
That's true.
Yeah, he was taking a prize that he believed was. It was just
two prizes.
It was 2 prizes, and it was just too much for him to resist. But it turned out that it was military vessels,
Right, privateers.
loaded with well-trained men, and that was the end of Jean.
Right, he
Yeah.
died February 5th of 1823.
Wow,
He was wounded heavily in that battle with those 2 ships. And it was a dark of night. There was fog and hard to see, and late. It was about 10 o'clock at night. The other 2 ships turned around and opened fire on him. Now there are quite a few rumors that exist about Lafitte that actually he faked his own death.
Right.
That he actually it's believed that he buried treasure in many locations. In fact, those of you who watch the little square tube that has images, there was an episode with Expedition Unknown, Josh Gates,
that's true.
that Josh was actually hunting treasure with some of his relatives. Now, he doesn't actually have any blood relatives. His wife that he had 1 child, and that son died before he died.
Right. And
So-
it's rumored that he may have had other offspring through other women, but
Right,
there's
it was-
no verified evidence.
Yeah, there was a belief that when he fled Galveston Island, he fled with a mulatto woman and a young boy. But there's no proof, and the people that claim relation to him are all by marriage through his wife
That's
and their
true.
family.
Yeah.
There's also a belief that he actually went and freed Napoleon,
That's a
and
bit
that
of
they
a
both
stretch.
came back and lived in Louisiana.
That's a bit
Very
of a stretch.
unlikely.
Yeah, a bit of a stretch there.
So quite amazing.
Right.
And,
Very interesting character.
interesting fellow. Now there's a couple good movies about him with Yul Brynner,
The Buccaneer.
the Buccaneer,
Yeah.
and actually I believe there was 2 movies that Yul Brynner portrayed him
Yes.
that are quite good.
Yep.
Yul Brynner and Charlton Heston,
Yes,
Right.
as Andy Jackson, of course.
Andy Jackson, who made good Andy Jackson.
Well, of course he did. I mean, by the Lord thy God, I'll kill the next man that moves. Sounds
A
more
little
like
bit
John
over
Wayne. That's all right.
dramatization,
Yeah.
but he's quite an interesting character.
You know, to Jean Lafitte, friends.
So Jean Lafitte, Jean Lafitte has actually got quite. There was a game. One of the first reviews we did of a game, Pirates.
Sid Meier's
Sid
Pirates.
Meier's
With
Pirates.
Jean Lafitte
Has Jean
in there.
Lafitte in there, and he's one of the top 10 pirates.
He's
that
got
you
that
have
big
to defeat.
mustache and a double-breasted vest. And
There weren't that many American heroes who were pirates.
No.
And
Jean
we
Lafitte.
He's one of
definitely owe
Yeah.
our independence to him.
I actually do.
As
It
much
could
as
be argued
people would
that's
like
true.
to deny it, without Jean Lafitte,
Yeah,
the British would have taken us at New Orleans and come up on through. And
that's true. Well, I think we can owe quite a bit of our country's history and our independence there to Jean Lafitte. If he hadn't been there to help General Jackson and Colonel Jackson or so, if he hadn't been there to defend New Orleans from the British, well, they would have taken it and quite possibly have held it and split our country in 2 and disrupted trade up and down the Mississippi River.
right, as we know how valuable that was during the Civil War. New Orleans was.
Tremendous amount of trade came in there. And it was the way the Mississippi was the way to reach the inland empire of our country, sending boats up and down and sending goods up and down. And they would have split our country in 2, I think.
So with that,
So,
I think
with
it's
that,
time.
we're going to raise a glass to Jean Lafitte. As Captain Turner has said, there aren't too many American heroes who are pirates,
Right.
but he is certainly one of them.
Pirate history, American history, be the same
Be
thing.
one and the same quite often.
Well, we actually, it's not just Lafitte though. It's a lot of our history is owed to piracy and
Especially privateers.
Privateers.
Right? Yeah. For the longest time, America never really had a navy. They just had armed privateers, and they did quite a bit of damage throughout the world, and they captured many ships, and we can be very proud of that. That's
I
true.
hope you've enjoyed this little bit of an
It's a
episode.
bit of history here. So as we end our episode of the Pirate Round, we say to you folks, thank you so much for watching. And we thank you so much for stabbing that subscribe button and spreading the word of piracy here on the YouTubers channel. And we say to you, to all our friends who aren't here, to those we've yet to meet, we say to you friends, thank you so much for watching. And remember, you be a pirate. You be strong, you be confident, and you have confidence in yourself. And don't let anyone grind you under their heels or make you afraid. You be a pirate, and you be strong. Yar har.
Your heart. Well, smooth sailing to you.
Har, thank you.
Ah, Captain Crunch. This is one cargo of Jean Lafitte cinnamon crunch that nobody will get.
Don't, Lafitte. Cinnamon Crunch is sweet and tasty, with a zippy flavor like cinnamon toast. It's a good part of a balanced breakfast.
Too bad. In just 10 seconds. Or was it 5 seconds? It was 5 seconds.
Lafitte Cinnamon Crunch. How can such a bad guy have such a good cereal?
I didn't mean to.